breakfast table.
Reminds me of that place in River City, Absecon, the
Yeah.
Marriott.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a dining. It's an old place, and that's a dining room.
Yeah, there's one like that.
That's only $100 a night discount.
Oh, yeah?
On a weekend.
Really?
On a weekend, yeah.
Oh,
I used to
yeah.
want
What
one.
is it called? Yeah,
It's in Absecon, New Jersey. Special rate, like $1,000.
yeah. What was the view of the ocean?
The AAA discounts that have been AAA. Take some sort of discount.
Yeah, they probably do.
Oh, really?
Bird sound all over. They just
Really?
have a special deal with babies.
Wow.
Unless it's holiday week, I don't know. I said, well, we rented on the 6th, and I said, same.
And why is it purposely done? I think it is.
Yeah.
Very purposely done.
It's like stained.
They're not stains, they're clouds. Yeah, definitely paintbrushes.
It's paint.
You don't like it, so it doesn't matter. That's
all of them. Different all of them.
So when you sit down, I'm not going on to a conference.
Or anything better.
Why do you think the seat's gonna?
No, they're
Yay.
Dan, come on. Oh, come on now and dance. Pixie, you're not gonna get any. Okay, now it's your turn. Come on. Come on, dancing girl. She can go fast like a whip. I don't know what's the matter with her tonight. Okay. Here you go. You're falling over. Yeah, how are you gonna do this? Come on, Dixie. Come on. Now you. Don't you dare. Come on now. Don't be embarrassed. Don't embarrass me. Hey, hey, you two. Oh, you naughty doggy elephant.
Come here. Come here, Pixie.
Where's the face, huh? Where's his face? He's throwing sand, Dixie.
He likes animals that are, you know, more,
What's your favorite?
yeah.
Talk to the elephant. Say hello. Talk. You can't hear? I actually bought her a tape of animals so that she could see it. Where's the elephant? Oh, birds. Yes. Look at the birdies.
He's trying to grab him. See, when people walk on there, she becomes pretty much disinterested.
What do we got here, Dixie? What do we got? Ooh, look at the birdies. Oh, look at that. Sick, Dixie.
I thought stories about elephant graveyards were
Oh,
Get
that's
some other-
terrible. That's just terrible, Dixie. Bones.
Just don't show me old bones.
places I'd heard about.
No, that one's dead, Dixie.
I wanted to die.
Where's the doggy? Where's the doggy? Where's the dog? She's looking at it. Get the doggy, he's having a yummy.
You don't believe it.
I just said you like to watch cartoons, now you're not doing it? It's Hoyt? Smell the flower.
He's like,
Give your man a kiss.
Oh, hello.
I know that, because I wrote down some directions to the house once.
Ferret.
Wild babies are a joy.
she ever broke the television this way?
No, but Linda and David's television is the kind that if she scratches it, she can ruin it. It's either, it has these lines across it.
Oh, it's one big screen.
Yeah. And she's talking to them.
Probably not. Actually, we should have looked at their neighbor, but it's not too loud. Alrighty. Okay, are you okay?
How'd you discover this? How'd you discover that she barks at all these animals?
Just, I had TV on and she would start, watching it. And I would watch her looking up at it and everything, and then she started to react to it, little by little, so.
Okay.
Thank you. We've been recording a family history of the Weiss family, Shapiro family, and the telephone stop it. Okay. As I was saying, we were taking a videography, if you will, of the family history of the Weisses, the Shapiros, the Schwartzes, and whoever, the whole family, and even friends. And trying to get from them some idea of sense of family. One of your phones is off the hook.
Going in my bedroom.
right here.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Lee.
And to introduce yourselves in terms of what your relationship to me is or to the family is. And then describe a little bit about, okay, Stanley, you obviously were close to my mother at one point or another, long, long ago, and maybe describe a little bit about those remembrances. And then a little bit about your family, perhaps, and when you moved down to Florida, and what you do, things like that. So wherever you want to start is very good.
Okay. My name is Stan Zipper, my wife JoAnn. We're just celebrating our 40th wedding anniversary
Wow.
this year. And I am Ira's first cousin. His mother and my mother were mothers.
Sisters.
I like what I said.
All right, you're right too.
Anyway, our relationship with Ira goes back a long way. Although we live in Florida now and have lived here for the last 20 years, we remember many happy days and fun gatherings with our close-knit family back in New York. And I remember Ira's mom before she was married to his father, Jack. And she used to spoil me a lot since I was the oldest.
Man.
I was the oldest nephew in the family. My sister was the oldest niece. But I was the oldest nephew, and before my Aunt Lily and all her 5 sisters were married, they paid a lot of attention to me, and I was the star attraction. So I enjoyed all that attention being heaped on me. And my Aunt Lily would bring me presents and nice gifts and toys when she would come back from her job. And I remember that very well.
And you supported a perfume in the toilet?
And I did get a bottle of my Aunt Lily's, Ira's mom's favorite perfume one day, and decided to, since I made a little fire in Grandma's bathroom, in order to mask the fragrance of the fire, I grabbed a treasured bottle of perfume from Ira's mom, my Aunt Lily, and promptly proceeded to spread that around the bathroom to mask the fumes from my arson. And even though Aunt Lily was quite disgusted with me and appalled at the fact that I spilled out her precious perfume, I was soon forgiven because I made a big lower lip like I was going to be sad, and of course that covered everything up and everything was wonderful again.
How old were you then?
I was probably at that time maybe 6 or 7 years old,
Okay.
if my remembrance serves me.
Okay.
And
that was on Sterling Place?
that was either in Sterling Place or on Rochester Avenue. I can't remember which
Okay.
of those 2 residences. I think it was on Rochester Avenue. In any event, I remember a lot of happy days with my aunt and with our family. We were fairly close-knit, and we enjoyed a lot of activities together, like going to the beach and going to parks and just being with each other. Families were very close-knit in those days, and on every weekend, I would either go one weekend to my mom's side of the family and another weekend to my dad's side of the family. So at most, I saw my cousins at least every other week, and my grandparents and all my aunts and uncles. And then I remember my Aunt Lily got married after the war, and her husband's name was Jack Shapiro, and she changed her name from Lily Weiss to Lily Shapiro. And Uncle Jack and Aunt Lily lived down on Long Island, which was really far, far away from New York. I couldn't imagine how far away that might be. And I don't think I was ever out that far on Long Island in my life. And neither was everyone else. And it was a great adventure to get in the car on a Saturday morning and drive out to visit Uncle Jack and Aunt Lily. And Uncle Jack had a window cleaning route out there on Long Island, and they had a big sprawling house, something like I could only remember in the movies, in the Western movies. It had a porch, and it had great big old oak trees, and everything looked quite rural back in those days on Jane Street, I believe it was.
Jane Avenue, yeah.
Jane Avenue. And of course, all my frame of reference was from having lived in the 5 boroughs of Manhattan, namely Brooklyn primarily, and Patchogue looked a lot different than any place I had ever seen in my life. And it was very exciting and very thrilling to anticipate a long ride out there, and it took hours to get out there because the highways weren't built, the highway system wasn't built yet, and you needed to get there on all the little winding roads that led from the city out to Long Island, so it was another world. And before long, Aunt Lil and Uncle Jack were blessed with a daughter, and her name was Elaine, and she was really my closest cousin in age. And Elaine and I got along famously, and we were always very excited to see each other and meet each other at various family occasions. And after a while, my cousin Ira appeared on the scene. And Ira was a real active boy, and I enjoyed playing ball with him. We played catch when we'd go out to the house. And my cousin Elaine wondered why I didn't want to spend every minute of my visiting time with her. And suddenly I was interested in throwing the ball around to her little bratty brother, Ira. However, we got past that, and those years were very happy and pleasantly spent, and we enjoyed each other's company immensely. And as happens in all our lives, we moved on. World events and our careers separated us. People moved from the old neighborhoods, and Uncle Jack passed away in an untimely fashion, and Aunt Lily decided to move down to Florida. And lo and behold, circumstances in our lives caused us to move to Florida, and then it was like recalling old acquaintances again. And of course, we would see Ira when he came down to visit with his wife and children, to visit his mom in Century Village in Palm Beach. And it was good to get together again and hear about all the things in our lives that had gone on since we last met. And after Aunt Lil passed away, then happily Ira still wanted to maintain his contacts with the family, and those kind of things was something nice that you don't see these days, because people were imbued with a love of family and a need and a enjoyment out of reaching out and keeping in touch. So here we are on videotape as one of the branches of the clan, so to speak. And,
You left out a whole part.
what part did I leave out? Luckily I have my wife here, that's a great memory. And,
You left out a whole
of course
part.
mine is failing already.
When-
You did mention something about being married 40 years. You have a family, you had a
Oh,
career.
JoAnn's
but-
gonna tell about
but-
the family.
But
Yeah.
after we were married and Stan graduated pharmacy school and was now a pharmacist, we bought a house in Hewlett. And Lil was working for A&S, and I used to go to A&S all the time. And then when I had children, I would take them along to A&S, and she got to see them more than anyone else in the family, because I'd be there at least every couple of weeks. And the kids used to run around, the 2 boys, I have 2 boys, we have 2 boys and a girl, and the 2 boys used to chase each other through all the displays. and Lou would be standing there watching them with me, and they would pick up straight pins and give each other shots on the rug, on their ears. And Lily would say, "It's okay, don't worry, leave them do it, it's all right." And then she would get us huge discounts on everything that we needed. And we spent many a happy afternoon visiting with her, and the kids loved to go there and see her. They thought that she owned the whole store. So that part was very nice. But as far as our family goes, we have Alan and Eddie. Eddie's our oldest. Then came along Alan and then Linda. And now Linda's married to David, and Alan's married to Amy. And Alan and Amy just had a baby, Marnie, who's 6 months old now. And Eddie has been married a couple of times and is now a single man again. And that's where our family is right at this point. And we're waiting to hope we have more grandchildren soon.
To be able to spoil them.
Yes, of course.
Of course.
And now our branches have spread out across the country, to California, where Alan is, and to Davenport, Iowa, where Eddie is, and Linda lives right here in Coral Springs, Florida. And this is probably symptomatic, and they would love to see their relatives more often. But this is what's going on these days. Children are settling all over the country and becoming dispersed, and it is more difficult to keep in touch with each other. But I'm happy to say that everybody and children and hopefully their offspring will have a strong desire to periodically keep in touch with members of their family and be able to talk about things that they remember that were interesting and fun to them, and hopefully there'll be some continuity that way.
Didn't your mother always tell us about when she was younger and she used to go with her sisters, different places, and take them different places?
Her sisters?
Yeah. Lil and Dottie and...
Dottie told us an interesting story about Grandma and Grandpa Weiss. And at 65 years of age, I guess I still haven't heard all the stories about the Weiss family.
I don't think so.
It seems astounding to me that I'm still able to learn some unbelievable facts and things that were unbelievably interesting that happened to my aunts and uncles when they were little. And recently, Aunt Dottie, who is now the sole surviving child of the marriage of Hyman and Anna Weiss, recently she moved to New Haven to a senior congregate living facility, and before she went away we had lunch with her, and she told me an interesting story about her and her brothers and sisters when they were little. And do you remember how old Dottie said she was when all those things transpired?
No, very young.
I think they were just like of maybe grade school age.
I think so.
Possibly. Dottie told us the story of Grandma and Grandpa had come over from Europe and settled on the Lower East Side of New York. And at one point in time, Grandpa was out of a job, and
For a long time.
right, and so Grandma needed to make some extra money to keep body and soul together of her large family, which at that time consisted of 9 children? 8 children that lived anyway. And so she decided that she would take a job in the building as more or less of a superintendent, as we used to call them in those days. Somebody who looked after the maintenance of the building that they lived in. And because they were poor and Grandpa was out of work, they had to leave their apartment and move into a cellar apartment in some tenement hovel on the Lower East Side. I can't imagine what that must have been like in a hot, airless, windowless tiny cramped rooms with 8 small children and 2 adults. However, Grandma Weiss fell ill at one point and had to go into the hospital, had to be hospitalized for an operation, or even her children were somewhat vague about that. And since Grandpa was unemployed and often had to leave the house to look for employment, they were alone, and the children were alone, and evidently the welfare authorities or social services authorities got wind of this and decided the children needed to be in a shelter, in a children's shelter, because they were too small to be left alone. However, my Aunt Dottie, who was the oldest of the children, said that she was capable of taking care of the others. And my Uncle Sam was the youngest. He was just a baby in a crib at that time. And what happened was that it was decided that my Aunt Dottie and possibly your mother were going to be taken in by the nuns in a Catholic convent to be taken care of until such time as a better,
That she was
either
going
a
out of the
better home,
hospital.
or until such time as their parents were able to resume taking care of them. And my Aunt Dottie remembered vividly going with my Aunt Lily. They were holding each other's hands, and the social worker took them to a convent. They walked up the stairs of a big church in New York on the east side, and my Aunt Dottie was crying, and so was my Aunt Lily, and they didn't want to go, and they wanted to go back to the house, and they were carrying on as small children of that age well might do in the circumstances, similar circumstances. And but they had to go in, and they went into the convent, and the nuns wanted to give them some food. And of course they were brought up in a kosher home, and they didn't recognize any of the food that a Catholic convent had to offer children. And they were very hungry, but they wouldn't touch any of the food because it was considered treif, unkosher. And of course they wouldn't trust anything that they were given in a non-Jewish home. And my Aunt Dottie remembered that they gave my Aunt Lillian herself some white bread to eat. And they had never eaten white bread in their life. Didn't know what it
Didn't know what
was,
that was?
and were afraid to eat it. And however, they were hungry, and I guess they overcame their fears and ate some of it to assuage the hunger pains in their bellies. And they cried all day long and carried on that they wanted to just go back to their house, and they didn't want to stay there. However, they were made to stay there for several days. And they had plotted and planned to run away anyway, but happily, somehow, Grandma got well enough to come home to take care of them again. And when she did, the owner of the tenement that they lived in approached my grandma, and he said, "You can't live in that cold, dusty, hot, airless room down in the cellar any longer. Your children are going to suffer by being in that kind of an environment." And he offered Grandma a room on the 6th floor of the building. It's the 6th floor, it must have been like an 8-story walk-up if I remember. And he gave her a room with a regular window where the children could at least have an open window. And my grandmother didn't want to leave because the rooms were nice, but on those regular upper floors of the building, all the tenants had to share one toilet on each floor. And my grandmother couldn't abide with that because she said at least in the basement they had their own private toilet, which is something of an unheard of luxury in those times. In any event, they did move upstairs, and things got a little bit better for them. Grandma's health was restored miraculously, and she was able to resume her duties of taking care of the house somehow. And but my aunts remembered very vividly those scary few days when they thought they would never see their brothers and sisters or parents again, when they were taken away by the scary nuns who were dressed in black robes, and
Oh, man.
everything was very foreboding, and it must have been a terrible trauma for
Yeah.
young children
Yeah.
to experience something like that. However, things got better. All the children finally got old enough, and they all, as they, in many families, in a lot of families, almost all of them, they all went out and got jobs, and they were able to chip in their little bit of money to find a little bit better place to live. And subsequently, Grandma and Grandpa and all the children moved to the Brownsville section of Brooklyn. And compared to the Lower East Side, it was like, as they used to say in Yiddish, a golden Medina, a wonderful city of gold in Brooklyn. It was airy, and it was cleaner, and the rooms were bigger and bright. And as a child, I still remember Grandma and Grandpa Weiss's apartment on Eastern Parkway. On the ground floor, I remember their great big windows, which I used to climb out of occasionally for entertainment, to my grandmother's horror. And I remember wonderful times that the family spent together in that apartment. My grandparents later moved to Rochester Avenue, which is only about a mile away from there. And I remember happy times with my family, giant seders at which Uncle Jack, Aunt Lily, and all my uncles, aunts, and children who were running around like loonies, having a wonderful time, and sleeping in strange places like two chairs pushed together, and Grandma's big bed with her overstuffed goose down pillows. And it was just a very warm, wonderful feeling. And it was a certain closeness that is an enviable situation for children to experience today, because things have changed so much. So I remember those days most, and I can remember all my cousins, and Ira and his sister Elaine, and all my other aunts and uncles and their children, and all the good times we had there. And my grandparents lived there until they both passed away back in the 50s.
After I
And,
came into the picture.
Right. JoAnn came into the picture
Got a chance to
back in
meet
the
both of them.
50s.
They came to our wedding.
Right, and was lucky enough to know my grandparents before they died, while they were still in fairly good health. And she loved everybody in my family as I loved her family, and we had a great extended family of cousins, aunts, uncles, and what have you. And those were all wonderful times.
I remember a story about your mother.
Did you ever hear that story, by the way, that I
No,
got related?
absolutely not. Never heard of that.
Isn't that
I mean,
astounding?
We were
I mean,
amazed when Dottie told
Yeah,
us
is
that.
that
We was.
Whoa.
I
Yeah.
stood there awestruck when Dottie
Exactly.
told us that.
Yeah, no,
And she
this is-
remembered things in almost minute detail about, everything that had transpired then.
Wow, that's
And
unbelievable.
it was a scary story.
What's the
because,
story that Ira remembers? Let's hear
Yeah,
it.
well, this is a minor thing, but one of the family circles, in the family with 8 children, apparently, and I can only say this apparently, it was either every month or every other month, there was a family circle meeting at one of the children's houses.
Right.
I don't know how regular it was, but at one point they had minutes. They did. It was real formal, but it became less and less formal. It was like the movie Avalon, like you said. And one of the things, like you were describing where we lived in God's country in Patchogue, on the other spectrum, we had an uncle that lived in New Jersey. And initially they were in Elizabeth, and then they moved out to God's country, Freehold. And they started a chicken farm out in Freehold. We're talking about Shirley and Nat. And every once in a while we had the family circle out in Freehold, New Jersey, which to us was a pretty long trip, but that's besides the point. When we got there, everybody stayed there and had a great time, and we had the parents at most of these family circles always went into a poker game with a penny and two poker, and Nat loved that. All the brothers and sisters played the poker game. Anyway, your mother didn't like the poker.
Excuse me, do you remember that there were two games going? One was the game where all the men would be playing, and then all the women had their separate poker game.
Yeah,
There were two tables, one for the men and one for the women.
Because the men couldn't stand.
Right, the men could not abide having women because, of course,
Let's
in
hear
those
what
days,
Ira knows about
it was
your mother.
claimed that women didn't know how to gamble. See, the big gamblers,
Yeah,
a penny and
the
two.
penny and two.
Right.
Let me hear what Ira knows
Yeah,
about your mother.
anyway, I was about 13 at the time, and I was downstairs playing Marty's jazz records, and I guess I was copying them to tape, whatever. And your mother comes down, and this was a jazz rendition of something was going on, and your mother comes down and says something like, I bet you don't think I know the name of that song. I said, no, you wouldn't know the name of the song. Oh, yes, I do. It's Tangerine. And I said, you're right, absolutely right. I couldn't believe it. You know, it's
It was
a
funny
generation
with things like
gap
that,
because, you know, you don't expect these things.
Right.
And she was really with it.
She would do
She's,
that with our kids too. She would always bring something on them.
She
She was very
a
cute.
great person.
Yes.
That was fun. Those were fun times, those excursions, because if you remember, the three far-flung places that we would go to was your house in Patchogue. That was a major trip.
Yeah.
And it was exciting to anticipate going out there. I mean, it wasn't all that exciting to think about going to Uncle Sam and Aunt Helen's, because they lived in Brownsville anyway.
Oh.
Or Uncle Pincus and
Leona.
Aunt Leona, because they lived in Brownsville too. Those were places you knew quite well. But when you were contemplating going out to Patchogue, the drive and the preparation, and we would bring food along and have, listen, you got there, everyone would contribute something that they brought along to, help feed everybody for that day. It was an unbelievable experience. The other far-flung place was Ira's recollection of Cousin Marty and Aunt Loretta's house, Nat and Shirley's chicken farm in Freehold, New Jersey.
On the hill.
Right, and
Yeah,
that was a
that was
long
wonderful.
drive, and I can remember myself and my sister Flora would never survive the trip back. We'd fall asleep in the back of the car on the way home, probably just after we got off the Pulaski Skyway. That was the cutoff point past which we couldn't keep our eyes open any longer.
And then
And-
after we were married, we used to take Jeffrey.
That's
Flores
right.
Jeffrey up there.
When I got
Used to play
married,
house.
like JoAnn and I would drive out to in our own car, and we didn't have any children yet, so I'd take my sister's children, when Jeffrey Rockstein, and we'd drive him out to the farm in Freehold. And Nat and Shirley were always delighted to see us, and it was exciting. You could just see the look on their face when they got company out, just as you could see how pleased your parents were when everyone came out to visit them, and how excited everyone was, and all the hugging and kissing and shouting and greetings, and it was just
Do you
a
remember
wonderful
one trip?
experience.
One trip when Jeffrey was getting very restless on the way home, and I gave him my pocketbook to play with, and he was taking everything out and playing with it and everything, and I didn't remember that I had a tampon in there. So he pulled it out and he says, "What's this?" So I said, "What's this? This is a mouse. Look at the tail." And I threw it out the window. And to this day, he thought I had a mouse.
And Jeffrey remembers that quite well.
He thought I had a mouse in my pocketbook.
And we thought that was, what was the
Anything
third
to
far?
entertain
Oh, the
kids.
third far-flung destination that we went to I don't know if, of course you remember this, Ira, was Uncle Bill and Aunt Shirley
Oh, geez, in Liberty.
moved to Liberty, New
Yeah.
York,
Yeah.
up in
It
the
was
Bush
another
Belt
big
in the
trip.
Catskills.
Yeah,
And that was another all-day excursion
yeah, yeah.
that required packing of food and
Yeah,
clothing and changes of clothing, and
yeah, that was a trip.
because all the children were bound to get dirty or
Yeah.
You
Do
remember the
something that
hill
would
and
tear
the
their
carts,
pants
the
or
go
something.
kart that they had?
I don't
They
remember
built?
the go-kart, no.
I think my kids rode in that.
right.
Probably didn't have it yet when you
Uncle
were there.
Bill had taken some old carriage wheels and a 2x4,
Nah.
and a couple of 2x4s, and put nailed some orange crates to it, and built a little buggy.
It was cute, it was very
And
cute.
down that hill at the
Yeah.
end.
And
Yeah.
they had
Hill.
very
Not a
steep
little hill.
hills.
Yeah.
No, very steep
Whoa.
Good
hills.
size hill.
That could go half a mile.
Yeah.
And
And-
the end of it was the
right.
synagogue.
Right.
I never
right.
wanted to watch when they went through.
Right.
the-
Eddie and
Yeah.
Alan vividly remember shooting down those hills. There was a hair-raising ride down the hill.
But
I don't know how
loved
they
it. They loved going
survived that, but they remembered vividly going up and down that many times, and they remember getting together also in Bill's house. They remember his house was a big sprawling house
Yeah,
also,
Yeah, it's it had.
right? Built around the turn of the century probably.
Yeah.
So those were the three big excursion visits, and you could see the family was starting to move out to far-flung destinations even then.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was the beginning of it, but they kept, like you say, they had this real strong desire to see each other and stay together. And if you observe them, you could see how well they all enjoyed seeing each other and being in each other's company and looking forward to visiting each other and having these meetings, which were sometimes, as you said, formal and sometimes informal.
Mostly informal.
Mostly
As-
informal.
as-
But I
as the
remember a
years went
lot of shouting, everyone
Yeah.
trying to talk over the next one's voices.
Yeah.
And
And
I
have arguments
remember,
about ridiculous little.
right, I
Exactly.
remember you and I and all the younger children fleeing with our hands over our ears to
Yeah.
get away from the din of their quote-unquote discussions
Yeah,
about whatever
Yeah.
hot items were going on. I remember one of the most important things that they had to discuss was the bringing over, after World War II, they were going to bring a cousin who had survived the Holocaust in Europe, and they were going to bring him over back to the United States and collect the expenses that were required to bring Abe. His name was Abe Alweiss,
Yeah.
and
And his wife?
he got married when he moved here.
Oh, okay.
His wife, trying to remember her name, Esther,
Okay.
Abe and Esther. And she was also somebody who was repatriated from Europe that lived through somehow. And Abe wound up in Italy somehow at the end of the war and was secreted there by non-Jewish people, by Italian people, and he lived through it, and we brought him over here, and they had many vigorous discussions about the logistics of getting Abe from Italy and bringing him over to the United States, which he subsequently did, and he joined the family circle too.
Excuse me, we gotta change the battery.
I see the light flashing,
Yeah.
See how much?
because
Good.
I was remembering my Uncle Sam Weiss.
Yeah.
And when he was young, before he was married, when he was in his 20s, he got a job driving a truck for a appliance company called the Air King Radio Company. And it was very exciting because he would come over to our house when we lived in Bensonhurst in
Hello.
Brooklyn on 69th Street and 21st Avenue. And Sam would come over and my mom would make lunch for him very often. And I would take that opportunity to run downstairs and jump into the cab of his truck and pretend that I was a truck driver and turn the wheel and get up on the running board and honk the horn and all kinds of other stuff while Sam was upstairs having lunch and talking with my mom. And and Sam was the youngest of all the children, and he would often come to get me before he was married. He would come to get me, and I'd go with some of his friends to Coney Island, and I would go swimming with them on the beach, and we'd have a lot of fun, and Sam and his friends would always bring a bat and a ball and some gloves, and we would play ball on the beach, and Sam would always buy me either a hot dog or an ice cream cone. And, right, and we'd all go home on the subway with wet bathing suits because we didn't have any place to change in those days, and we hated, at least I hated, to get out of the water till the last second before we went home. And since the Wonder Fabrics weren't invented then, we all were wearing woolen tight bathing suits that took a long time to dry. We all sat with wet pants, which we had to pull over our swimsuits on the Sea Beach Express coming home from Coney Island at night. Of course, we didn't mind any of that at all. That was not even a minor annoyance, because the fun of going there and having a good time and swimming and playing with Uncle Sammy and his friends was more than worth a little bit of a trip in a wet bathing suit. I remember that really well.
I remember Grandma's house, of course, the last apartment that they had on Sterling Place was a first floor walk up. And as you walked in the house, to the left was a big bedroom, this so-called second bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next room, if you want to call it that, was a bathroom, which was huge also, with the pull chain toilet.
Right.
And then you walked in a little bit further, and then it was the kitchen. In the kitchen, on the left, as you walked in, were cabinets, and then the stove and I guess the refrigerator were on the next wall. And from there, you can walk into the living room, what I call the living room dining room, which was huge, where they have these famous Passover dinners, and the tables were all set up, extended from one end of the room to the other end. I don't remember whether, I think the kids were separate, had the table toward the kitchen separate. I don't remember that very, very well. And like you said, they had the master bedroom was also a huge, huge room, which seemed to me to be an oversized bed, but of course now, who knows what it was. Obviously no televisions, they had one radio, always tuned to the Jewish radio station, whatever that was.
WEVD.
WEVD, right. Playing, on a Saturday or Sunday, whatever, they normally would play.
Yiddish music.
Yiddish music, or
And stories, Yiddish.
Oh yeah, the stories, yeah.
Yiddish stories,
in Yiddish,
yeah.
which I never understood, but always sounded interesting. They were very dramatic.
Yeah.
They were very dramatic.
They were the equivalent of
Soap opera.
all the English soap operas. They were just Yiddish soap operas, same plots and everything, except the language was spoken was Yiddish.
Funny crying.
That's right.
Crying with the music and crying
I
with the
remember
stories.
one time going upstairs to Grandma's house there, and I had to go to the bathroom, and because we had traveled all the way from Bensonhurst from Brooklyn to their house, and it was just before Passover. It was the week before Passover, and when I went into the bathroom, as I was peeing in the toilet, I looked to my right, and there in the bathtub was a huge black fish that was about 3 feet long, swimming around in the bathtub.
Uh-huh.
I was mortified. Luckily, I didn't pee in my pants or on the floor. And when I finished, I stared down into the bathtub in disbelief.
This fish.
And it was the first time that I found out that my uncle Pinky as we called him,
Yeah.
had brought fresh fish from his place of employment, which
Real
was
fresh.
a fish wholesaler in the Fulton Fish Market.
Yeah.
And I knew that he always brought fresh fish home for Grandma, specifically a lot of fish around Passover so she could make a homemade gefilte fish. which was excellent. But I had never actually remembered seeing one that big anyway, swimming around in a bathtub. And of course, Grandma said that that was the natural procedure, the normal procedure to keep the fish as fresh as possible till the last moment when she would kill it, clean it, and she would give me the job of grinding the fish up, and she would cut it in chunks. See? And then she had this old-fashioned crank grinder, which was used to grind both meat and fish up. But of course, this was a special one for her fish. And you would clamp that onto an old wooden chair with a screw clamp. And once it was firmly affixed, Grandma would cut chunks of fish up and fill a bowl of cut up chunks of fish, and I would have to feed them into the grinder and turn that crank and grind out her ground fish so she could make her
You loved it. Huh?
gefilte fish. And then I would have a bowl with the ground fish, and I would bring that over to Grandma, who was always busy working at either the stove or the sink. It seemed that all my life when I came into that house, Grandma was either at the stove cooking or at the sink cleaning up after cooking or in preparation for cooking. And no matter how hard she worked and how many of us there were to feed, she always had a smile on her face. Never once did I ever hear her say she was tired. And naturally, all her daughters would always pitch in to help anyway during Seders and times when we all got together. And they would, all of them, all the women would be in the kitchen doing chores like peeling potatoes and preparing all kinds of other food and grinding up horseradish, which they would gleefully give me to do, and then laugh when I started to cry from the vapors of the horseradish, or when I would cry from grinding up the onions that had to be blended in with the chopped chunks of fish to make the gefilte fish. And those were all very joyous times. I always remember everyone's face with a smile on it, and a lot of happy and exciting voices and excited voices talking about everything imaginable. And however, the Seders were held with great amount of decorum.
Oh, absolutely.
Grandpa sat at the head of the table and he conducted the Seder, he led the Seder. Every single word of the Seder was said in Hebrew.
Absolutely. Hours,
And
that thing.
hours passed, songs were sung, every traditional song was sung. As the children got older and went to Hebrew school, they would chime in with things that they had learned in school. And of course, their parents beamed at them with great pride and pleasure that their children were able to contribute to the Seder. And if you started to get too tired or cranky, you were carted off to some bedroom and laid down to sleep it off.
Yeah, on top of the 48
Right,
clothes.
and there were clothes all over the place.
Yeah.
Just the amount of closets were minuscule in those days.
I think that's why we left to have Seders. Nobody had a family. When we
Right.
first started the family.
And right,
Yeah, Seder every
JoAnn and
year.
I have
Two
always
Seders.
loved Seders because
So great. for
it was a
the
lot of
family.
work, but it was always worth it because whatever family we could get together was just reminiscent of all those good times we had there. We didn't know we were having such a rare good time because we thought that was always going to go on,
Yeah.
and everybody had that.
Yeah.
Little did we know we would look back upon that with such great nostalgia and pleasure at the times we had and the fun we all had together at those gatherings.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
really marvelous.
Lady,
Really good.
lady.
Can't hurt that.
So did that cover the occupations? And
Yeah, that
More or less,
that's fine. That's good. Just turn it. Late.
I don't know if you remember
Off.
Uncle Bert's really old now that requires.
See what can
Why does it
happen
look
to
so
people?
grainy, hon?
All you do is.
Honey, just be happy with the way it is.
I thought it looked clearer than that originally.
Well, it does in the
It's
movie,
like-
but not on the tape.
I saw somebody at my niece's wedding.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Sister
The young
Wallace Farr.
Stanley.
I haven't seen him in like 25 years. And
You couldn't
he's
believe
really-
it.
He's like
Did
80
I
years
friend
old.
you
Or whatever.
now?
So it looks at me and he says,
You know what we can do? We can
awfully
fast forward
thick,
some.
right? Well, like,
Oh, yeah, they have a habit of
I
saying
was size
things.
8 when I
People
saw
want this cousin, that's one of my cousins, one of my friends, and
One of
one of
my
JoAnn's
friends.
girlfriends.
Like cute puppy.
These are all the
That's my brother behind the stand, and my sister-in-law, my ex-sister-in-law.
Loretta.
He's
We
remarried.
went
My
to,
cousin
we should
Sandra.
live in Daytona. We went
Yeah.
to see Loretta in Daytona a few years ago.
Who else is there? There's Flora.
Yeah.
There's one of
She
my
seems to be
classmates
doing
and
well
one of
now.
my friends on the end from
Loretta?
the old neighborhood in
Oh, yeah.
Bensonhurst.
She's got a
Thank
very nice
God.
husband.
Yeah,
She's
she's a nice girl. She deserves it.
Very nice husband.
Yeah. Look at Stanley, how good he looked there, and young, tiny kid. Look how gorgeous she looked, though.
I was just thinking about Irving the other day.
And Dottie,
There's
yeah.
Earth. There's Nat.
Nah,
Yeah.
Bernie.
Yeah.
There's, I think, Loretta behind
and
there.
Bill, they got
Leona.
Bill.
Leona behind. There's Jeffrey.
Jeffrey Roxton.
Jeffrey Rockstein. And yeah, there's Dottie. And there's Bill.
Is Lillian in here or no?
And
Your grandmother?
Yeah.
Yeah, she was just there.
Where?
I'll see if I can.
There's Shirley, Bill, Dottie, Irv, Nat, and Bernie,
Did we just see Lil here
I don't
before?
think she was there.
No?
and Leona.
Maybe I'm
I don't
wrong.
think we saw.
I thought she was
no,
there.
Probably in other pictures, but she wasn't there.
I want to see what she looked like when
She
she was young,
looked
especially my
like
grandfather.
what
I've never
Andy
seen
Lane looks like, we never see either.
Parker looks like no one's been the congregation.
Because they wouldn't let us take pictures during the ceremony. You're very, very bad for the tape, and don't do it. Yeah.
Wow.
Bad enough I did it when
You
we
could
went.
blackmail Steve by
Yes,
threatening to
sir.
show those pictures.
Yeah. There's Irv.
He didn't change much, I'll tell
No, except that he's a little older. This is my mother-in-law and father-in-law. That was your grandma's sister. And there's Stanley. Look how beautiful she looked there. When I was after that, she didn't fix herself up. This is my grandmother and my brother. That's your great-grandparents.
I've never seen either of them, I'm sure.
Now that's who that is.
I've
They-
never seen him in a tuxedo.
Yep.
And there's a Shapiro
you. There's
is.
that famous smile on my
Famous
grandmother. She
ears are in
always had that
Yeah,
smile.
but this is
That's
the
where
white
famous
side.
ears come. What?
Yeah, that's the white side.
This is my ex-sister-in-law. Bentley. And his ears are fine.
That's fine.
Yeah. He says, this is the time to form them.
It's not completely formed yet.
Right. It's
Is that
soft
you?
tissue. Yes, that's me and my parents.
His grandma.
And they
did.
stone
Yeah.
days. Yeah, look how good she looked. They look so great there.
Grand-
What is that?
What?
A bone.
Oh. Wow, it's hard.
Yeah, it is. Making a mozzie. Oh, he loved doing this too. He really loved it.
Would the record have like all the sound on it, or?
No, it tells different things. They have someone describing
See
this.
that?
Look how he cuts
Oh
it.
my
They
It
cut
God.
it in towards it. They would always cut bread that way in the house too.
scared me.
Never
you know?
once did they ever cut.
Never know when they might have slipped in here. Who's this? Oh, yeah, it's going too fast. I thought I just saw Shirley in there.
I just saw Marty.
Did you?
Yeah, you wearing a white dinner jacket.
Yeah, I remember him wearing the white dinner jacket, as a matter of fact.
Of local clothes.
Yeah,
What's it, 60s?
40 years ago.
Yeah, 1957.
Yeah, just before
To
the
be
60s.
exact.
I just saw, Florrie's first husband, Sammy.
Did anyone bouncing wine bottles?
Yeah, they were playing some Yiddish music here. Everybody's dancing around. They danced so hard that my cousin lost her whole slip out underneath her dress.
Whoops.
Now, there's my mother-in-law and father-in-law.
Here's Helen and Sammy right up
Oh,
front.
yeah, right,
To the
they
left.
just danced
Yeah.
by. This is my father's brother and his wife,
Who are they talking to?
cousins. Mine.
There's Shirley
Shirley
and
Irv.
Irv. There's Marty right behind. There's
Oh,
Sam.
there's Sam.
There's
There's-
Nat and
Nat
Loretta.
Loretta.
See?
And Loretta. Oh. I can't understand that. They're not in this picture yet, Stan.
I could swear that
Think
they were in it.
might-
See him
Yeah.
on the end?
Did you see him?
Yeah.
Who was the lucky one to catch it?
I don't remember. But I remember this. My sister-in-law's mother grabbed it instead of my cousin who I threw it to. That's my cousin.
There's
That's
Loretta.
the
She,
mother.
there's your sister
There's my sister,
with the
yeah?
green
Yeah,
dress.
I knew
Yeah.
she was there.
Oh, cool.
Yep, I knew she was there.
Sure it's not your mother?
No,
Oh,
that's
that's my
his sister.
sister.
That's his sister. I think it was one of the last affairs that she came to for a long time. Before she came again.
Right, this is where you can fast forward.
Oh, I'll do it.
I assume it's spinning around.
Let's shut this a little.
No, they're not all here. You want me to turn?
Just a
I hear it
second.
spinning.
Did you find the
Yeah.
picture?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
I don't know why they're not in the video. I bet you if we could slow down the dancing, they'd be somewhere on there.
Can I turn?
They must have been hiding, you know?
Yeah, my father wasn't a dancer.
His
I
own
said,
table,
are you
yeah.
kidding me or what? At his own table there. Don't be silly. Now, did you find your sister?
No, it's
Not yet.
No, you know, I
She
don't.
might have been sitting at our table.
Loretta was
I
there.
don't remember where, but I don't remember seeing
Oh, I know
Any
she
of the
was
younger-
there. It is.
Yes, I
and his
remember.
wife. Zwern
I
was
moved
at
Yes,
that
Zwern.
time.
her blocks
Yep.
away.
He's,
Yeah, she didn't want that to be in the picture.
And that's their daughter and son-in-law next to them.
Deutsch.
Deutsch, right?
Boy, good in memory is there too. We're gonna stick them with the older people.
That's nice.
Well, we weren't. Why should they have to be there? This way they could have, fun with people their own age. Wouldn't you rather be with your own age than with your parents' table?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
That was a Karen.
It was boring.
Karen's wedding. We were 5 people. That's it.
El agua o leche lo quiere? ¿El agua o leche? La pillo.
Picture taken with your parents?
Come on, be here.
How about you?
Comes like this and instead comes right.
Oh, wow, look at him. Oh, that's cute. Oh,
This one's
sure.
the real. This one's the real one.
What is it? Can you take it?
How much is it?
Comes right.
I'll pay for it. I'm gonna pay for it. Let him have a piece of cream. Turned out good.
How you guys do?
He's like a little old man. How you doing, Mr. Troll? How you doing? Oh, would you like to
Rolling.
They say you were ready.
Here we go. I'll be back.
Probably can do work from there if you want to, right?
No.
They don't have like an info for you or anything.
No.
Oh, you know that happens to me all the time. I lose it.
All the time?
Did you lose it? That's the worst, that's the thing that hurts.
Yeah, it is. You're right, it's something like it. It is. It's funny because I just remembered years ago when we came here, they said they were opening up this place, so it just occurred to me. I never saw it. Something to do. See, I thought of something.
How about that? Right.
Pero yo voy a pasar, voy como 3. Somos del mismo signo, ¿cierto? Por eso Piscis. Claro, ¿tú eres fanática del agua? A mí, yo veo una fuente que es Yo veo una fuente que
Soy el primer asistente del capitán, o sea, es el primer maid. Acá en la barra tenemos nuestra bartender, ella se llama Verónica. Ajá. Y tenemos el nombre del capitán, Bill. Ahora, damas y caballeros, vamos a darle nuestra información que todo el mundo debe saber por derecho. Primero, no se podrá fumar en la parte interior del barco. Repito, no se podrá fumar en la... Ah, seguro la brasileña no se me puede ahogar. ¿Verdad que sí? Ok, ya todos tienen la información, ¿verdad que sí?
Oh, look at these guys.
Este río es muy bonito, señor. ¿Sí? Pero no, muy bonita risa. ¿Sí? ¿Estén casados o solteros? ¿Casada? Oh. ¿Tiene tarjeta de crédito? Sí, ahora sí. Me voy a vivir para Brasil. ¿Sí o no? Ah, bien. Ok, a ver, otra familia por acá. Todos son de Brasil también acá. De Brasil, a ver, otra familia por acá. ¿De dónde son las familias acá, caballero? ¿De dónde son ustedes? Puerto Rico. Caramba, la isla de encanto. Oh, tiene una esposa, habla español acá, el nombre millonario. Bienvenido a Casa de la Derecha. ¿A dónde dejaste a la esposa? ¿En la casa? Oh, se fue a la República Dominicana y te dejó solito aquí en Miami. No importa, bueno, aquí hay muchas mujeres solteras, mira cómo es, cualquiera. Okay, now, first one, if you can see on the left side of the vessel, you're going to see the building with the blue letters. This is the Miami Herald. This is the only one newspaper in Florida. Now we have, in the 1914, many years ago, the name is Venecia Crossway Bridge. Damas y caballeros, acá a su mano izquierda tenemos este puente que está abierto ahora, está roto. Este es el puente más viejo que...
Worth more than a house is. Tear the house down and build a new one. But if they're smart, they'll leave 1 or 2 partial walls up. So they do that, build a new house around it, they can get what's called a remodeling permit. If they told us for the whole house down, they have to do a new building permit, which is 10 times as expensive as a remodeling permit. I have something that'll help you understand and enjoy the trip a little bit better on Celebration. We have postcard booklets available.
Island is because in Italy, in Venezia, they have the same 7 islands like that, in the same position, each one connected by the bridge over there in Italy. That's why we call it la Casa Blanca que estamos pasando ahora a su mano derecha. Esta Casa Blanca que está acá con muchas matas de coco. Es aquí donde vive. Coming on next, ladies and gentlemen, if you can see, Flagger is the first man. He was in building the rail for the train. Y iba a morir, y la Corte Federal decidió dejarlo en libertad para que muriera en paz acá en su casa en la Florida. Acá esta casa carmelita que ustedes están viendo acá, esta casa carmelita. Damas y caballeros, acá a continuación esta mansión que estamos viendo acá, en blanca. Esta mansión cuesta $23 millones. Aquí es donde vive el presidente de la compañía CRBC. Backyard belong to Vanilla Ice Baby. Damas y caballeros, esta mansión blanca, $70 million. Damas y caballeros, aquí a continuación está Raymond and Rich Family. Raymond and Rich Family. Tucker Penn Family. They live in there now. Tucker Penn Family. $6 million mansion. Damas y caballeros, a continuación esta mansión color rosada. Damas y caballeros, a continuación esta mansión que estamos viendo ahora. Florida, de Orlando Magic. Y so young and so rich. Damas y caballeros, a continuación esta mansión que estamos pasando. The name is Shusha. The White Mansion.
Patchogue, we started to play Mahjong.
Mm-hmm.
We had a Mahjong group
Yeah, I remember
with
that.
Nettie Kreisberg and
Right.
Evelyn Weiner and your mother and Ruthie Burke.
Okay.
And we used to play Mahjong. We had a wonderful club. Played all those years, never had an argument, you know, we're the best of friends. But your mother and dad were always, they just never could do enough for people. They always did everything in such a quiet way. You know, when we moved to Babylon from Patchogue, there they appeared at the house. We hadn't moved in, we were getting the house ready to move in. Your dad did all our floors, he waxed and polished them, and did all the windows in the house, and your mother set up my whole kitchen. In fact, we made toast or something, and she burned her arm on the toaster. I can remember these things, you know. And I was at your bar mitzvah,
Yeah.
as well as your wedding, and I'm always talking about your mother and your dad and things that, you know, memories that we had. We all used to go to the mountains together, the Catskills, and we just had the best of times, the best of times. And your bar mitzvah, I'll never forget, because it was an Orthodox,
Oh, yeah.
highly Orthodox church, synagogue, and the women sat in the balcony.
Upstairs, yeah.
And Bess Perlmutter was, she was from Patchogue also, a friend of your parents. She was standing next to me, and a woman from the congregation turned to her and said, "How come you're carrying your purse on a Sabbath?" And Bess said, "Well, I came on the train," which only made the matter worse.
Yeah, well.
But we had your lunch after the ceremony next door, and it was in that synagogue in Brooklyn because of your grandparents, so
Yes.
that they could walk to the synagogue.
Yeah, that's the reason.
Yeah, and I will never forget, and I have never tasted krepla like that day of the luncheon. It was just like feathers, you know.
Mm.
So much going on. So we were friends all these years, and then your mother came to Florida after your father passed away, and of course I was here too, but Manny and I would be going back and forth to Babylon and coming here, but I always stopped to see your mother. We'd go out for luncheon and do things together again, as we always did. And yeah.
It was nice.
Yes.
I remember a couple of things. I remember it was your mother, right? That she didn't live with you, but she was there a lot of times.
My mother was there, yes.
Yeah.
My mother and father lived in their own home, but my mother became ill. She had to go to the hospital, and we brought my mother and father to stay in our house, really more convenient. They lived in Jamaica Estates,
Yeah.
you know, that was a big,
Yeah.
you know, trip to go back and forth, and my mother stayed with us, and suddenly she had latent diabetes. It was like overnight. And took her to the hospital, and she just passed away. And then we kept my father with us, and my mother passed away in 1969, and my father passed away in 1971. And then we used to go from our home to we had a place on the ocean in New Smyrna Beach, and here to Boca. And we came here in 1978. We were going back and forth. And in 1980, my husband suddenly was ill, and he passed away in May of '81. And I came and stayed here.
Now, a little bit about your family. You have 4 children. Kenny is the oldest, and then Patricia.
I have Kenneth, who is the oldest, Patricia, and that's when I met your mother and father when Patricia was born. You know, our Mahjong Club all came to see me because I had Patricia. And Barbara is the middle daughter, and Kathy is my youngest daughter, and she and her husband and children live in Lake Clark Shores, which is adjacent to West Palm Beach.
Mhm. And they, of course, got, let's see, I think they all got married, right?
Yes, Patricia isn't.
She got married.
She was divorced.
Yeah.
And,
But she has four.
but she has 4 children.
Mhm.
One, Paul, next to the youngest, passed away a few years ago.
Mhm.
But she too has grandchildren, which makes me a great-grandmother.
Can't believe that. I really can't believe that. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's really something.
Yeah.
One thing you always think back, I think the older you get, the more you think of the past. And your mother was a wonderful cook and a wonderful baker. And we had many meals together, you know. Our house was, everyone used to come there because Manny worked for the railroad, and at 5 o'clock at night you might say to me, come over for dinner, and at 6 o'clock you would have to go to work. I could never have anything definite, so we held almost everything at our house. But when we played mahjong, and as I said, your mother was such a wonderful baker, we were always so happy to go because she had made some kind of a chocolate cake or something new recipe. And we all went to our mahjong. We used to go on Tuesday night, and we had to see Milton Berle before we played mahjong that night. And we get to your mother, and she had store-bought cake. And that was
That was a disappointment.
it was like a mortal sin. We never let her forget it. We never let her forget it. It was something that never happened in all the years we were together. Store-bought cake. It was really something.
In the 60s, I remember being at your house any number of times, and you had, the Kreisbergs usually came over, and they'd have poker games or whatever downstairs.
Usually on Saturday
Yeah,
night.
Saturday.
Play
Lawrence, well, you
Yeah.
know.
And Nettie would bring blintzes, and I would make something, you know. And this is how we were always doing together.
Yeah,
Your mother and dad would be there, you know, and really something. And just all so close. But life in Patchogue was like that too. Everyone was just very social with everyone else. They involved themselves in all the community affairs. It was a wonderful place to live, Patchogue. Just grand.
There's one other thing. I gotta get this on tape. My sister married Robert Felice.
Right.
And the Felices are related some way in your family, right?
My mother-in-law was a Felice.
Ah, okay.
And so all the Felices we're related to all the Felices
Right.
through my mother-in-law's
Right.
side. And Gabriel Felice
Which is Robert's father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gabriel Felice, his father Peter, was a cousin to my mother-in-law.
Oh, okay. So it's pretty distant, but it's there.
And when we first came here, right after we bought this place and we were here, Gabriel and Dorothy Felice, Robert's mother, bought apartment 108 down the...
Oh, they were in the same complex?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, they were in the same, because when we moved to Babylon, and I used to go to Alan Felice's, Dorothy's son's beauty shop in Huntington all the time. So we became very close together. And Dorothy and Gabe were here, and then they kept the apartment a couple of years, and they moved to Boynton Beach, to the Bentry, their villas. Because Gabe liked to putter around with gardening and so forth. And then I remember Gabriel went up, Dorothy, they used to go back to New York for the summer, and he had several complications, and he had open heart surgery. They couldn't decide, the doctors couldn't decide whether to do the surgery or not. and he even called up here to discuss it with me. And the surgery was successful, and a few days later, he passed away from a blood clot, you know.
Mm.
And Dorothy passed away also.
Sure.
She had
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
But I used to say, eventually in Patchogue, everyone was so close together that everyone became related, no matter
Yeah.
who they were.
Yeah, 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 it's true, it's true. All right, please.
I do it?
No, what you do?
I do a lot of work.
I don't go to the hospital again.
No.
Never, ever. I'm never on a ventilator, so it's very good at sitting. Hello. Hello, everybody in New York.
electronic equipment must be in the off position. Once again, please return your seat backs and tray tables to their upright lock position. Thank you.